Well, what's up, everybody? Great to see you guys. Thanks for coming out tonight. Hey, it is, man. This is the kickoff of March Madness. I just love it. It's my favorite time of year. Sing with me. It's the most wonderful time. I love this time of year. My team won today. My bracket's not doing too good, but my team won today, so I'm excited about that. Thanks for coming out to Real Life this week. I want to welcome our Canyon Country campus. Let's give those guys a shout out, as well as Discovery Church. And those of you that might be joining us online, or maybe you're sitting outside, we're so glad that we get to do this together. We are, as I've heard someone say, better together. Tonight we are starting a two-part series we're calling Invited. Isn't it a great feeling to get an invite? Maybe somebody invites you to go to a dance, or maybe somebody invites you to go to their wedding, or maybe you're invited to play in the NCAA tournament, and you feel like, oh man, I get to go? I mean, they want me there. Well, all throughout the Bible, it talks about how the kingdom of heaven is a party. It's described as a feast. It's described as a wedding banquet, a blowout celebration. And here's the cool thing about it. Everyone is invited. The God of amazing grace extends this invitation to porn stars and painters, pumps and preppies, prom queens and principals and pediatricians and plumbers, Pharisees and pharmacists, presidents and pastors. All are invited to the party. Now, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Following Jesus is not always easy. It's not like a life of constant, unicorns and rainbows and those golden Oreos, which are awesome, by the way. It is a life of servanthood. It's a life of self-denial, a life of humility, generosity, even sacrifice. I mean, Jesus even told us, he said, in this world, you will have trouble. But he also said, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. In the midst of this tough world, I've invited you into a life that supersedes any temporary hardships. You were invited into a life of purpose and passion and peace and indescribable joy. In fact, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. He says, I have laid down my life so that you could live forever. The kingdom of heaven is a party, and you are invited. Now, Jesus was a master storyteller. He would use object lessons. He would use humor. He would use relevant news stories. He would use allegory and metaphor, examples from everyday life so that people could relate. He was just this incredible master storyteller. And we all relate to stories, right? I mean, there are times that I like to tell a lot of stories when I teach. And sometimes I'll take a story out of a message that I did years ago, and I'll take that story and I'll put it into a brand new message. And someone will come up to me and go, oh, bro, I heard you preach that message before. And I thought, I've never preached that message. It's brand new. Oh, it was that story, because people remember the story. And Jesus knew the power of telling a story, and he told a bunch of them. But probably his most famous story is the one he told about this dad and his two boys. Now, I know it's familiar to some of you, but it just never, ever gets old to me. Charles Dickens said it was the greatest story that's ever been written. And I would have to agree with that. So I want to read it to you from Luke chapter 15. I'm going to give a little commentary along the way, and then we're going to kind of go back and break it down a bit. But this is the way the story starts. This is Jesus teaching. He says, there was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. Now, in the Jewish culture, this was like a big-time slap in the face. Sometimes a dad would divide it early so he wouldn't have to manage his farm. He wouldn't have to manage his business or estate anymore. But for the kids to make the request, that was like saying, you know what, Dad? I wish you were already dead. So the dad divided his property between them. Now again, dividing inheritance in that culture, if you had 3 sons, you would divide it into 4 parts, and the oldest son would get his part plus 1. He would get like a double portion, twice as much. So in this instance, the older son would get 2/3 of the inheritance, and the younger son would get 1/3. Well, it says that younger son took that 1/3. Not long after that, he got together all that he had, and he set off for a distant country, and there he squandered. Isn't that a great word? Squandered. You ever done that? You ever squandered any money, any time? Ever squandered an opportunity? It says he squandered his wealth in wild living. And after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country. Isn't that the way it always goes? Wasn't expecting a famine. And he began to be in need. So he went out and hired himself to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. Disgraceful for a Jewish kid because of the whole kosher thing. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So we got a pretty bleak picture here for this kid. But here is the turning point of the story. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Just make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and he went to his father with his memorized speech in his hand. But while he was a long way off, his father saw him, which means he was looking, and he was filled with compassion for him. The Greek word for compassion there is this word spalachna, which is that churning in your gut, that visceral feeling you get in the pit of your stomach that just moves you to action. He had compassion for him, and he ran to his son. To run in that culture was seen as a sign of humiliation. You had to throw aside all pride, all protocol to run toward somebody. He runs toward his son. He throws his arms around him and kisses him. The word for kiss used here means to kiss profusely. Many, many kisses all over his face. And no telling what that kid must have looked like and what he must have smelled like. It didn't matter to this dad. The son said to him, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." He didn't even get to finish his speech. The father starts calling out to the servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him, given only to a person of high honor. Put a ring on his finger that was a sign of sonship. Put sandals on his feet that was a sign of freedom. Bring the fatted calf and kill it, which was reserved for only special occasions. Let's have a feast and let's celebrate. Let's party, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he's found." And so they began to celebrate. This is the third story in a succession of stories that Jesus tells in Luke chapter 15. He tells one about a lost sheep. He tells one about a lost coin, and here about a lost son. And every time in each story, there's a party thrown because something valuable was found. The kingdom of heaven is a party, and you're invited. The story goes on. Meanwhile, there's kind of like a music change right here. Meanwhile, you remember the old video game Super Mario? You play Mario Brothers. You know, you had the bum 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 ba da. That's what happens right here. The da 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 happens right here. Meanwhile, da 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 da. The older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. Boop, 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 boop. He called. Sorry, I'm getting carried away with that. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. "Well, your brother's come. Haven't you heard? And your father, he's killed the fatted calf because he's heading back safe and sound." Well, the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out. Again, the dad takes the initiative. He goes out to another lost son and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look," that always sets the tone for some healthy dialogue, doesn't it? When you start that way. "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you." He didn't realize he was actually free. "And I've never disobeyed," which is self-delusional. "I've never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours," refuses to call him his brother, "who has squandered your property with prostitutes," how does he know that? Like, they haven't been texting back and forth. He's not following his younger brother's Instagram feed. He doesn't know for sure what his little brother's been up to. In his jealousy, he just starts making stuff up. "This son of yours who demanded of you, disrespected you, dishonored you, who shamed this whole family. This son of yours comes home and you kill the fatted calf for him. And that was my 4-H project. My son, the father said, you're always with me and everything I have is yours. But don't you see, we had to celebrate. We had to throw a party and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and he's alive again. He was lost and he is found. Story about 2 boys, 2 lost boys. And a story about fences. One son couldn't stand them. He said, fences, wow, way too restrictive for me. Way too restricted, no fun. Staying within the boundaries of my father is just ruining all the fun that I could be having out there. There's a lot out there that I'm probably missing out on. So you know what? I'm hopping this fence. The original word that's used there for wild living, when it talks about he squandered his wealth in wild living, it literally means with no hope of safety. You ever been there? And some wild living like that? If you have, it makes you want to ask the kid, what were you thinking? Why would anybody leave the safe, healthy, loving home of your father? Why would anybody rebel against his loving boundaries? Why would you want anything else when you already have everything you need? Well, let me ask all of us, why do we jump the fence? In a word, appetites. That's why we jump the fence. Can I give you just a few reminders about our appetites? First of all, appetites were created by God. They were just distorted by sin. I mean, we were made in the image of God, and he wired us up with all kinds of healthy desires. We have all kinds of healthy appetites. There's the appetite for food. There's the appetite for sex. There's the appetite, I know there's a few more than that. Anyway, the desire he put within us to be loved, that's a good thing. The desire to achieve, it's a good thing. Sexual desire is a good thing. To want to win is a good thing. To want more responsibility, that's a good thing. God created those appetites. But sin distorts them. And when you and I walk with God and we do life his way, all those desires can be expressed in very healthy ways. But when you and I take life into our own hands and we hop the fence and we live like there is no God, then our desires become totally self-centered and they become almost insatiable, which is the second thing about appetites. Appetites will never be fully satisfied. You know that? Appetites know one word. You know what the word is? More. You got it. No matter how much you achieve, how much you accumulate, how much praise you receive, how much money you earn, you always want more. You get an award, you get a raise at work, and pretty soon you want. I thought about this the other night while eating at a great new restaurant. I polished off all of my enormous burger and then half a Debbie's meal. And I sat there going, man, I am so stuffed. I am so stuffed. I may never eat again. You ever say that? I may never eat again. And then the server comes by with that dessert tray. Can I interest anybody in some dessert? I said, let me take a look at that. Perhaps I could manage a little more. We always think there's room for just a little more. And we live that if there's this elusive more out there that will finally make us go, yes, oh yes. Now that's enough. Now finally enough. But it doesn't exist. Have you ever noticed this about appetites? Appetites always scream, right now, never later. Appetites always scream, right now. Your appetites, my appetites scream, come on, you got to move on this now. Dude, you got to grab this now. You got to experience this now. You got to taste this now. You got to drink this now. You got to feel this now. And our response to that, our ability or inability to manage those appetites, to say to yourself in the moment, you know what? I'm not going to let my appetites rule my life. I'm not going to let instant gratification lead me around. Our ability to say that will determine the direction of our life. So I'm learning that instant gratification is a terrible life coach. You ever heard of life coaches? Instant gratification is a terrible resume. It has coached more people toward destruction than anything else I know. More families have been wrecked because somebody could not control their appetite for more. They let their impulses, their thirst for instant gratification begin to lead their life. And I'm telling you guys, when you jump the fence because your appetites are telling you to, and you let instant gratification become your life coach, you don't stand a chance. And I think we've all been there, at least to some degree. Now, I love how Jesus says in the story about this kid who jumped the fence and wasted his life in wild living, how that turning point says, but he came to his senses. He came to his senses. Man, that's a turning point for anybody's life. You know, I hear some people say that you have to hit like rock bottom before you come home to God, which I lovingly say, no, you don't. Now, in regard to your humility, that's true. You must have one of these come to your senses kind of moments. This humble awareness of, in my Father's house is help, in my Father's house is healing, in my Father's house is a change of direction. But you don't have to hit rock bottom before you come to your senses. A buddy of mine in AA told me one time, he said, it's like riding an elevator. You don't have to go all the way down to the basement. You can get off like the third floor if you want to. See, you can recognize the temptation. You can see it for what it is. You can play the consequences out long term, then be honest about the reality of your current situation, assess the damage that's already been done, and get up and head for home. And again, with God, it's never too late to come home. That kid might have hopped that fence and left his good father's protection, but he did not leave his love. He came to his senses. He said, you know what the truth is? My dad is good. Home is good. This is bad. This is really, really dumb. My appetites have been distorted by sin. They've been screaming right now for a long time, and they will never fully be satisfied. The answer is my Father's house on the other side of the fence. I've always loved that old song, Desperado. Why don't you come to your senses? You've been out riding fences for so long now. And I'm just telling you, if you would have one of those come to your senses moments, you would find what this kid found. A loving dad waiting and watching and longing for his son to come home. A dad that's studying the horizon, waiting for your silhouette to pop over the hill, and you will find this dad running to you. You know, it's the only time in the Bible where it says that God runs. God throws his dignity aside and runs to me and you. He embraces and kisses and calls us his son, his daughter, and throws a party in our honor. That's what's waiting for you at home. Now, like I said, this is a story about two sons, two desperados, two lost boys. One hated fences. The other one built them. He built them as high as he could build them. One was an uncontrolled rule breaker. The other was a self-righteous rule keeper. And you know what? Both were lost. In fact, the older brother is really the target of this story. If you would read the first couple of verses in Luke chapter 15, you'll see why Jesus launched into this in the first place. Look what it says in Luke 15. It says, now tax collectors and quote-unquote sinners, notorious sinners, were all gathering around to hear him. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, this man, he welcomes sinners, and he eats with them. Now the rule-keeping Pharisees were like this self-righteous brother who lived with a sense of superiority and entitlement. You talk about building fences. Oh, these guys, they added plank upon plank upon plank and put like barbed wire on top. They built the fence so high that people could not see God, and they slapped a keep out sign on the gate. They prided themselves on keeping the letter of God's law, and they had rules about everything. In fact, 613 extra rules that they made up. They pressed them on the people. They created impossible expectations. They skewed the common person's view of what God was really like, and that's why the people hung around Jesus, because they got to see what God was really like. And that ticked the Pharisees off. They hated Jesus because of the way he expressed this unconditional love and grace. Here is Jesus swinging open the gate to their exclusive club and inviting all kinds of notorious sinners to come on in. They had the same attitude as the older brother. You're welcoming them home? Them? You got to be kidding me, them? Don't you know how bad they've been? Don't you know what they have done? How could you let them in? We're the ones that have been keeping all the rules. We're the ones building and repairing fences for God. We're the ones who've never messed up. We've worked so hard to make God proud, and now you're pulling this. And they refuse to go to the party. Here's the deal. Prodigals and Pharisees both need grace. There's a verse that our kids memorized, and they would quote it every morning before they would head off to school. We'd sit around the breakfast table, we'd eat, and we'd pray, and they would quote this verse from Colossians chapter 2, verse 8. See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the basic principles of this world, rather than on Christ. Both the boys in this story, they represented each of those things. One was sucked in by the basic principles of this world. The other, human traditions. And both things are hollow and deceptive philosophies. It goes on to talk about these older brother type of rules. Look what it says in the preceding, the next few verses in verse 23 of Colossians 2. Such regulations indeed have an appearance of wisdom, but with their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body, they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence. In other words, rules never change the heart. It's only when you come to love and trust the Father that your heart begins to change. Debbie and I have 3 kids, proud of all 3 of them. In fact, this week is my son Derek's birthday. I love those guys. Jody, Derek, and Drew are our 3 kids. We gave them rules while they were growing up. We gave them these loving boundaries that kept them safe. They all had curfews. And as they got older, those curfews would change. By the time that Jody was like a senior in high school, she could stay out to like 6:30 or so. But they all had curfews. They all had rules. They had places they could go, places they could not go. But you know what happened? When they grew to love God, we didn't have to set as many rules. They just followed the rules because they loved and respected and trusted the boundaries and the unfailing love of God, who really was their good, good Father. And when you are captured by the heart of the Father, you begin to change. This is a story about fences. 2 boys, one hated them, the other built them high, and a father who stood by the gate. A father who runs saying, I want all my kids to grasp how high, how wide, how deep, how long my love for them is. And I don't know where you find yourself in the story. I don't know which one of these boys that you might be most like. I mean, honestly, you might be more like the younger son who struggles with fences. You've never really liked restrictions. You thought that all these rules and boundaries that God sets up are like ruining your fun. You just want to hop the fence and see what's out there that you might be missing out on. Or maybe, honestly, you really have let your appetites and your impulsiveness and your instant gratification kind of lead your life through the years. And maybe that's just led to some really bad decisions, some pain, some kind of addiction or stronghold, and now you're miserable. If so, you need to know the Father's been longing to see you pop over that hill. He's been waiting for you to come to your senses, turn toward home, and find real love. He can't wait to throw a party for you. Or maybe if you're honest, through the years, maybe you've become more like the older brother. It's easy to do, to become a person that likes to build fences. There's a sense of justice, a sense of I'm right and everybody else is wrong. You know, honestly, maybe got a little judgmental spirit going on, a spirit of entitlement, saying, look how good I am. I've worked hard. You owe me, God. And maybe that's keeping you from seeing people the way the Father does. And I just got to tell you from my own experience, it's a dangerous condition. And if that's where you're headed, you need to know also, you need to turn around and head toward home so you can join the party. You see, you can see the Bible as this like impossible rule book, or you can see it as an incredible love story. And I think Jesus told us this story to show us the unfailing love of the Father, a Father who stands by the gate and longs for all of us to come home and be captured by his heart. I want you to see a few verses about how the Father, through Jesus Christ, has swung open the gate and invited everybody to come home. It says this in John, "But to all who believed him," talking about Jesus, "to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave them the right to become the children of God." Look what also says in 1 John, "How great is the love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called the children of God, and that is what we are." And look what Jesus said about himself. He said, "I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out, and they will find pasture." So desperado, why don't you come to your senses? Come on down from your fences, throw open the gate. It may be raining, but there's a Father above you. You got to let somebody love you before it's too late. Why don't you bow your heads with me just for a moment? You know, next weekend we are going to talk about responding to this invitation. How do you do that? And we're going to have a pool set up for baptism next week. If you're thinking about that, or maybe you've been ready to do that, I encourage you next week, come, be ready to do that. It's going to be a party in here as we watch people come home. But I want to say to you right now, you don't have to wait till next week to come home. You can do that right here, right now. We can have a real relationship with God. We can know him. He created us that way. He created us so that we would know him. We are his kids if we will walk through the gate, Jesus Christ, and embrace his grace and accept what he has done for us on the cross. But like in the story, it's your free choice. And I'm telling you, if you will humbly respond to his invitation, God will not only forgive your sin and give you a new life, he will move inside of you to help you walk a new direction every day. All you need to do is walk toward the gate and come home. So maybe right now in this moment, you could just kind of pray a prayer like that kid. Father, I've sinned against you. And I'm sorry for the way it's hurt you, God. I'm sorry for the way it's hurt other people. I'm sorry for the way it's damaged my own life. Right now, I just want to thank you for what Jesus did on the cross to take all that away. And in this moment, I accept what he did for me there. I invite Jesus Christ to be the forgiver of my sin, and I want him to lead my life from this moment on. Father, I thank you for inviting us to the party. I love that line in the song we sing around here. You couldn't imagine heaven without us, so you brought heaven to us. Thank you, Jesus, for doing that. Thanks for telling this story, Jesus, greatest story that's ever been written. I thank you for the heartbeat of the Father, that no matter which kid we relate to, there's the Father standing by the gate inviting us to the party because he longs to have us with him. Jesus, thank you for making that all possible. Thank you for being the gate. Love you for that. And I pray that many, many people here this weekend will respond to that, and next weekend will respond in baptism. I can't wait for the party we're going to get to throw next week. And I pray all this in Jesus' name, and those who agreed said, amen. Hey, so glad you guys are here. We are going to have baptism next week. Next week, I'm going to talk about how you respond to an invitation. You always RSVP, right? We're going to break that down a little bit next week. If you want to pray with somebody tonight, you got some need going on in your life, I have folks out in the lobby who would love to hang around and pray with you, talk to you about anything going on in your life. And don't forget to grab some Easter invite cards, because a cool thing is to get an invitation to church. They want me there. Invite your friends, your neighbors to come to Easter. It's going to be an incredible service. And hope you have a great week. You guys, see you next week. Glad you're here. See you.